guys, it's Flo. I thought that this would be nice to have some explanations about my process and how you can maybe learn some tricks and tips. Disclaimer, I am far from being an expert and I have a lot to learn. I am applying the knowledge that I accumulated from people that I consider as masters that are working for me. And I will link some of my favorite artists from YouTube on the description box down below, as well as the materials that I am using. To start off, I always paint the eyes. It's the main features of a portrait, right? And it is especially my favorite feature to paint. I like to finish as I go, meaning that I push the details almost to the maximum before I start another zone of the face, and so on and so on. I always come back later in the process to those areas to perfect them at the end. It's a pretty long task to paint an eye. Just one eye can take 1 hour or more. And so imagine when you addition all the zones of the face together, it takes at least 5 to 12 or maybe more hours if you push the details to the maximum. At that point, I can paint a portrait maybe in 5 hours. It's a very long process, but I enjoy it and I spend most of my free time painting. That's funny because when you watch time-lapse videos from other artists, you think it's very quick and easy to paint, but in fact it takes a lot of efforts and a lot of concentration, and it's much more difficult than it seems. I place the darkest color first, always, and I go to lighter and lighter afterwards. But what I do in general is that I place the colors that I see by checking the colors and place them into the area. That painting took me only 5 hours, which is very short compared to my other recent ones. I spent an average of 7 to 9 hours per portrait. It's not crazy compared to some other artists, but I like to paint as fast as possible because it can become very frustrating to have to wait for the layers to dry. I like to paint wet on wet, and I think it's much more satisfying for me. I did not tell you, but I generally trace my reference on my surfaces because it shortens the whole process. I can have the right proportion white array and I can focus on painting, which is my main goal. I want to paint and not draw. I find the nose the most challenging to paint. It is full of small shapes, tons of different values, planes, forms. I really struggle every single time I watch other artists paint that feature, and I'm trying to learn, but it's always very hard. And if you don't paint the nose right, I feel like the whole painting is bad. The thing that I find tricky also is that I don't want to define the nose too much, because when you see the obvious lines, it gives a fake, unnatural effect. You know, it doesn't seem very realistic. So you have to make sure to soften the edges. Yeah, it has to be softened, but it also has to be defined. So it's very complex to find the right balance. The mouth also is a very tricky part because it has so many variations of pink, red, purple, etc. And at the same time, you have to put in consideration the volume, the shininess. I think that the mouth is so difficult to paint because we have the lips, but you have also the Cupid's bow and the surrounding with the shadows and the lights. And I generally push the edges too harsh, and I take a lot of time to refine everything because it has so many details. Here the chin is not too complex to paint because Jeho has a very smooth skin, and the bone structure is not too prominent, and yeah, it's an easy task. Now I'm refining a little bit everything surrounding the main features and trying to correct some areas where the shadows or the lights are not placed correctly. I'm placing the background now, and because it's very contrasting compared to the face, I think it's very important to place it pretty quickly into the process, because it allows me to see the colors and the values much better. Values are the most important aspect of painting. If it's not right, the painting doesn't seem to be alive, it's pretty flat. And if you like the realistic style, I think it's one of the most important things to do. And I think it's much more important to have the right values compared to having the right colors. Colors can be approximate, and it still looks okay, but when the values are not there, it's very flat and very boring. Now I'm filling the huge gap on the cheeks. One of my favorite features to paint is the ears, because it's very rich. You can see it has tons of different shapes and forms, colors, values, and I think it's a nice exercise also to train the accuracy of the colors you pick, and overall working on the volumes, which is very important in realism. Now I am back onto the eyes, and I'm painting more details. You can see how it helps to define and give more life to the painting. And now moving on to the hair, we have again a lot of contrast, lot of texture, we have different values, it's very rich. I think his hair is very interesting to paint because as you can see, we have even some green, because his hair is blonde and the background is blue, so it creates a mix between the lighting and the environment. And once I fill out everything, I like to go back onto the details and put the shadows, and especially don't forget the shadows around the hairline, because it creates more volume and definition. Again, into the process, I'm defining the areas to correct any likeness issues and to define a little bit more the features. There is always room for improvement. And you can see the details and the refinement. It's a very long process, but I like it because it really gives life to the painting. I'm almost waiting until the end of the process to add the highlights onto the lips, because if you do it too early into the process, you can muddy up the whole painting and it's not pretty. Now moving on to the clothes, I'm painting the darkest colors first. And then I'm adding the grays and the blues and go lighter and lighter. And same for the white top. I put the darkest values first and then I'm going to the whites. And for that part of the painting, I don't push the details too much because I want to focus all the attention on the face. You can see you don't have to push the details to the max, especially on the studs. They look realistic, even if I only use 2 colors to paint them. And now I'm filling out the white top, and you can see nothing is white, everything has a gray tone. And painting white is not that easy because you don't want to muddy up the painting. And again, I'm refining everything. I'm softening the edges. I fill out all the gaps so we can't see the paper underneath. And yeah, I blend also quite a lot. And here I'm adding some details onto his cardigan. But I don't push too much the details because I want to focus on the face first. And here again I'm focusing on the lips and I'm adding more details so the painting is more alive. And here is the finished painting. I really enjoyed the process because I thought that this would be much more complicated because it was my first time painting J-Hope. I hope you will enjoy this painting and let me know who you want me to paint next. See you very soon!